The groom let go of the bride's hand right there at the altar and started walking toward me. In his perfect tux, with 300 rich people staring. He stopped in front of my seat, bowed his head, and said, "Yes, boss." So let me ask you, if that happened to you at your boyfriend's sister's wedding, what would you even do with your face? My name is Zola, and people like to say, I'm just a simple black woman. That day in that ballroom in that plain black dress that the bride called brave, like it was an insult. That's exactly what they thought I was. Simple out of place, lucky to be there. They had no idea that I was the one who had quietly funded half of the room. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This whole mess didn't start with the wedding. It started somewhere a lot quieter. A small coffee shop that smelled like roasted beans and old books with chairs that creaked when you sat down, and a door that never closed properly. It was tucked away on a side street most people walked past without noticing, which is probably why I loved it so much. In that coffee shop, I wasn't important. Nobody cared what car I drove or what my last name was. They just knew I liked my coffee, black no sugar, and that I always brought a book. I'd sit in the same faded burgundy armchair, curl my legs up, and disappear into someone else's story for an hour or two, letting the noise of the city fade into the background. It was the only place in the entire city where I felt like I could breathe without performing. What most people in that shop didn't know was that my email inbox could change their lives. Outside that little room, my real name wasn't just Zola. It was Zola Vance. As in Vance Capital, the extremely private fund that shows up in those tech articles about mysterious investors and improbable turnarounds. Some founders know me only as a single initial in their inbox, a V who wires the money right before everything collapses. I didn't ask for that life in the way people imagine. My parents built it from nothing. Brick by brick, deal by deal. And then a car crash took both of them in one night and dropped the whole empire into my lap. Lawyers, bankers, board members, they all lined up to explain how powerful I was. Now, how exciting this would be. Nobody mentioned how lonely it is when people stop seeing your face and only see your balance sheet. After they died, something in the world shifted. Or maybe the world stayed the same, and I just started noticing more. Friends turned into networkers. Overnight, every conversation became a pitch. Every, "How are you?" sounded like, "What can I get?" Dating wasn't dating. It was due diligence, wrapped in dinner reservations. You know that feeling when you can tell someone's looking past you, at what you can do for them, not who you are. Yeah, that became my everyday life. So I started hiding in plain sight. The companies, the deals, the money, all of that stayed very real, very active. But me, the human being behind it, retreated. I put distance between Vance Capital and Zola, with the gray sweater and the messy bun in a coffee shop. In that little shop, no one knew, and I liked it that way. Then one afternoon he walked in. Kalen Sterling did not look like he belonged in that place. Expensive suit, perfect haircut. The kind of watch you don't ask about unless you're ready to feel poor the whole image. I knew his face before I ever heard his name. Magazines, business articles, those lists people make about young billionaires to watch. He was one of those Sterlings. Old money, new money, too much money all mixed together. He ordered an oat milk latte like someone who's never had to check the price looked around, and somehow ended up sitting across from me. At first it was just that polite nod. You give another regular. Then a little small talk about the weather, the Wi-Fi, whatever book I had in my hands. I never told him who I was, and he never told me who he was, either. Not like that. He didn't have to, his last name did the talking for him, but inside that shop, we kind of agreed not to hear it. One day, I was reading this book about architecture, totally lost in it, and he leaned forward and said, "You know that quote is wrong, right?" I blinked, probably ready to be annoyed, and he pointed to the page. "It says architecture is music frozen in time," he said. "But if music moves and buildings don't, then what does that make a life?" We just stared at each other for a beat. Then we started talking like we'd been mid-conversation all along. We talked about art and cities, about how some people build lives like skyscrapers, loud, obvious, impossible to ignore, and some build them like quiet side streets, simple, easy to overlook, but meaningful if you know where to walk. We never talked about net worth, never about funding rounds or valuations. In that shop, he was just Kalen, and I was just Zola. For the first time in years, I felt like someone was looking at me and seeing a person, not a walking wire transfer. We fell into a rhythm without really noticing. Same table, same drinks, long conversations that drifted everywhere, except the one place I refused to go: the truth about my name. He'd tell me about his family in broad strokes, traditional old school a lot sometimes, and I'd tell him very little about mine, mostly because mine no longer existed. He knew I had a past, he knew I had scars, but he didn't push, and that silence felt like respect. Then one evening the silence broke with a phone call. We were in our usual seats, my book open, his jacket draped over the back of his chair. His phone buzzed on the table and lit up with a name that changed the air around us, a mother. He didn't even have to say it out loud. I could feel it in his body. His shoulders straightened, his expression shifted, his voice dropped into this careful, polished tone. He answered, "Mother, yes, everything's fine." I tried to focus on the words on the page, give him privacy, but the shop suddenly felt too small, like her voice was filling every corner, even though I couldn't hear it. I heard just enough from his side to know exactly what kind of conversation it was. No, she's not in finance. No, her family isn't. They're not in that circle, but they're good people. That's what matters. Yes, she'll be there. Maybe. We're still talking about it. He turned slightly away from me as he spoke, like he could shield me from words I wasn't actually hearing. But I've moved through enough of those rooms to know the script. Where is she from? What does she do? Who are her parents? Is she our kind of person? Will she embarrass us? When he hung up, he didn't say anything at first. He just let out a breath like the call had been a weight pressing on his lungs. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out this heavy cream-colored envelope with a silver crest stamped on the front thick enough to cut your finger on the edge. He set it on the table between us like it was a confession. "My sister's getting married," he said. "Clarissa." That's the invitation. I didn't have to open it to picture the whole thing. Ballroom flowers, handcrafted everything, 1,000 unsmiling photographs, a carefully curated guest list full of people who think good taste is a personality. He watched me like he was waiting for a storm. "Zola." He tried again. "My family is very traditional. They have these standards. And it's not you I'm worried about, I swear. I'm never ashamed of you. I'm afraid for you." He leaned closer, voice lower. "They have this way of talking. Little comments. Observations, they call them. They don't think they're being cruel, but they are. And I couldn't stand it if they turned that on you. If they made you feel anything less than what you are." I believed him. I could see that he loved me, that he was scared. But I also knew something he didn't. Those little comments he was talking about for people like me, they're not little, and they're not casual. They're the same blunt instrument that's been used on us our entire lives, just with a pretty ribbon on the handle. Still, I put my hand over his steady. "Colin," I said, "I'm not made of glass. I've been in rooms like that before. I know how that game works." I looked down at the invitation, then back into his eyes. I'm not going to that wedding to impress your family. I'm not going there to fight them either. I'm going because you're my person, and if you're going to walk into that room, I'm not sitting this one out. I'll go with you. You'd think that would have made him relax. Instead, it felt like a shadow slid across the table. Saying yes didn't solve anything. It just made what was coming real. A few days before the wedding, I was at home eating leftover pasta in pajamas when my phone buzzed with a notification. Friend request from Clarissa Sterling. I stared at that name on my screen for a long second. We had never met. She hadn't bothered to reach out before. But now that I was going to be standing next to her brother at her big rich people pageant, I was suddenly worth investigating. I accepted. If I'd ignored it, that would have been its own little explosion. Seconds later, another ping. A message. Hi, Zola. This is Clarissa. Kaylin's told me so much about you. I'm really excited to meet you at the wedding. So far, so harmless. Then came the next part. I know our family events can feel a little intense if you're not used to them. So I just wanted to send over a few dress ideas. Just things my friends and I love, so you don't feel out of place or anything. Hope this helps. Underneath that, there were links lined up like bullets. Chanel Valentino, Oscar de la Renta, one after another. Each dress more expensive than most people's annual salary, all in the same polished, appropriate style. On the surface, it looked like kindness. Underneath it was nothing but control. The message behind the message was loud and clear. You're not one of us. Here is the costume you must wear if you want to step onto our stage. I wish I could tell you I got angry right away that I threw my phone across the room. Truth is, what I felt first was just tired. Bone-deep tired. The kind you get when you've seen the same tactic dressed up in different outfits 1,000 times, and you're just exhausted from playing along. I could have snapped back. I could have said, "Don't worry about what I'm wearing. Worry about keeping your almost husband interested." But that's not who I want to be. So I typed this instead. Thank you for your thoughtfulness, Clarissa. I have my own style, but I'll keep your suggestions in mind. Looking forward to celebrating with you. Polite, cool, and very clear that I wasn't going to dance for her. Later that night, I showed the messages to Kaylin. He read them once, his jaw tightening, then read them again slower. She really sent you this, he asked, even though he was literally holding my phone. Before I could answer, he was already pacing thumb, hitting her contact name. Clarissa. What exactly was that message you sent, Zola? He said, when she picked up, voice low but sharp. I couldn't hear her side, but I knew the tone. The fake sweetness, I was just trying to help the... You're overreacting. He cut her off. Don't you dare say you were just trying to help. Help with what? Did you think she doesn't know how to dress herself? It was condescending and insulting. Pause. Then louder, embarrass the family. Zola could never embarrass me. Right now, you are the one embarrassing me. He hung up, still fuming, then turned to me with this apologetic look. I'm so sorry, Z. My sister is just shallow. She judges everything by the surface because she doesn't know how to look deeper. Please don't let it get under your skin. He meant well, but that one word, shallow, stuck in my chest. He saw her cruelty as a personality quirk. I saw it as a knife she'd been trained to use on people like me her whole life. That was the moment I really felt the distance between our realities. He could feel the impact, but he had no idea how heavy the weapon was. The night before the wedding, I stood in front of my open closet. On one side were the clothes of the life I'd chosen. Simple dresses, clean lines, neutral colors, things that felt like me. On the other side, zipped into garment bags, were relics of the life I had walked away from. I pulled one bag down, unzipped it, and there it was. A couture gown in shimmering fabric, hand-stitched, the kind of thing that gets written about in style blogs with phrases like iconic and timeless. I'd worn it exactly once years ago at a gala, where people had stared at me like I was an exotic exhibit, instead of a grieving 20-something trying not to cry into her champagne. I held that dress up and thought I could walk into that ballroom and let this do the talking. I could beat Clarissa at her own game. She wanted labels. I had labels that would make hers look like knockoffs. For a second it was tempting. Really tempting. Then I pictured myself standing there in that gown, letting their approval or shock bounce off something that wasn't even me, just fabric and price tags, and my stomach turned. Just fabric, and if I showed up in that dress, I'd be accepting their terms, their rules, their hierarchy. So I zipped it back up, pushed it all the way to the back, and reached for a different choice, a simple ink black dress. No visible logo, no loud details, just perfect tailoring and quiet confidence. It hugged my body without shouting about it. It moved when I moved, and it looked like something I would wear whether anyone was looking or not. That was my armor. Not glitter, not brand names. Just me exactly as I am. The Grand Sterling Hotel looked like wealth carved into stone. The lobby was all marble and gold, with fresh flowers everywhere, and staff who looked like they'd been trained not to blink. The air smelled like perfume, and money, and a little bit of fear. The second we walked in, I felt eyes on us. Not curious, not friendly. Weighing, measuring, assigning value. Kaylin's hand tightened around mine, as the whispers floated just under the music. I could feel his anxiety without him saying a word. We didn't get far before his mother appeared, gliding toward us like a very expensive ship. "Darling, you're late," she said, kissing the air near his cheek. Her voice smooth as polished glass. "Mother," he answered neutral. "You remember Zola." Her eyes flickered to me and back again so quickly, you'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. Of course, she said, clipped, giving me the kind of nod people give a stranger in an elevator. No warmth, no interest. Just a quick check mark next to acknowledge. Then Clarissa joined in. All white dress and posed smile and bridal glow that felt more like stage lighting than joy. "Oh, Kaylin, you finally brought your friend," she said. Dragging out friend. Just a little too long. Her eyes slid down my dress, nice and slow. Then back up with this theatrical little look of concern. "Zola, that dress is so minimalist," she purred. Very brave. There it was again. Brave, like wearing something simple in their world was some kind of risk instead of just a choice. Before I could decide whether to laugh or walk away, another woman leaned in. Older makeup, heavy eyes, sharp. "Aunt Beatrice," someone whispered. Her skin is quite dark, isn't it?" she said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Very different. Different. You know that word, right? The polite version of not like us." Clarissa smiled wider, pleased. "Oh, Aunt Beatrice, it's all about those exotic looks now," she said. "So uniquely beautiful. Exotic. That word has never ever been neutral." I felt heat rise in my chest, and I saw Kaylin's hand curl into a fist, his jaw tightening. He was about 2 seconds away from exploding, and the truth is part of me wanted him to. Part of me wanted someone in that family to finally hear how ugly they sounded. But on the other hand, I have been the angry black woman in fancy rooms before. I know how fast they flip the script, so I reached out and laid my hand lightly on his arm. Not to tell him it was okay. To tell him not like this. Not here. Not on their terms. Then I smiled, calm and steady, and looked each of them in the eye. "Thank you for the compliment," I said. "I've always been very proud of my heritage." The effect was immediate. Aunt Beatrice almost choked on her drink, muttered something about needing fresh air, and retreated. Clarissa's smirk slipped for just a second. They'd come expecting a performance, a flinch, a tear, a scene. I didn't give them any of that. On the surface, I'd handled it. Inside, the isolation settled in, deeper than ever. You can be in a room packed with people and feel completely alone. And that day, I felt it in my bones. We were seated not at the family table, but in that second tier of important, but not quite one of us guests. Business associates, distant relatives, people with money, but no real power in their story. The message was clear. You're here, but you're not. Here. From that distance, everything felt like theater. The flowers, the music, the perfectly timed laughter. It was all choreography. I watched the guests' faces all politely arranged into expressions they thought looked like joy, and saw calculation instead. Then the groom walked in. Marcus Thorne looked like he had been assembled by a committee. Tall, handsome, expensive tux that fit like it had been sewn onto his body hair that probably had its own product line. On paper, he was exactly what you'd expect Clarissa to marry. But I noticed something. His eyes weren't soft, they were restless. He kept glancing at his watch, flexing his fingers, shifting his weight from one foot to the other like he wanted to bolt. The doors opened again, and Clarissa started her walk down the aisle. Lifted chin. Smug little smile. Veil just so. The string quartet played. Everyone stood, phones discreetly filmed. Marcus turned to look at her and put on this huge smile that didn't touch his eyes at all. It was a photo smile, not a real one. As she floated toward him, bouquet held perfectly. His gaze slid off her like water and started sweeping the room. Row by row, face by face, searching. Then his eyes landed on me. At first it was just a glance. Then it stayed. His brow creased, his head tilted just a little like he was trying to line my face up with some memory that didn't quite match. I gave him this small, polite nod. Like, hey, sorry, if you think you know me, you probably don't. Let's both move on. But he didn't nod back. He just stared. The officiant started speaking words about love and commitment and lifelong partnership. But all I could feel was the weight of this stranger's eyes glued to my face. When it was time for the vows, the room went very quiet. Clarissa went first. She delivered her lines like a pro. Voice steady, smile, perfect hand, delicately shaking just enough to look emotional without ruining her makeup. People dabbed at their eyes, sniffled, glah. Then it was Marcus's turn. I'm Marcus. He started, then stopped. He swallowed, glanced at Clarissa, then looked back out into the crowd, straight at me. I. He tried again, but nothing came out. The silence stretched a little too long this time. Guests shifted in their seats. The pastor gave him a reassuring smile like, take your time. Clarissa's fingers dug into his arm. Marcus. She hissed, just loud enough that the mic almost picked it up. What is wrong with you? Most people probably thought, okay, classic cold feet, stage fright, whatever. But I could see something else in his face. Recognition. A dawning, earth-shifting recognition. He took a deep breath, like a diver pushing up toward the surface of the water. And when he opened his eyes, they were locked on me with a clarity that made my stomach drop. Then he did the unthinkable. He gently detached Clarissa's fingers from his arm, turned to her back facing the crowd, and said into the mic, I'm sorry, Clarissa. I have to do this. And he walked away from her, away from the altar, away from their perfect little script. He didn't speed walk. He didn't run. He moved slowly, deliberately, right down the aisle. The guests parted in front of him like someone had drawn a line through the room. You ever watch something so surreal unfold that your brain starts lagging a little, like it's buffering? That was me sitting there in my simple black dress, watching this groom walk straight toward my row. Kalen shot up, stepping in front of me like a shield. Marcus, what are you doing? He said, low and dangerous. But Marcus barely even glanced at him. His focus was locked on me, like nothing else existed in that ballroom. He stopped a few feet away, eyes wide, breathing hard. "It's you," he said, like we were alone. "It has to be you." "Vance." I never put it together. From the front, Clarissa's voice sliced through the air. "Marcus, what is this ridiculous little drama? Get back up here. That's just Kaylin's girlfriend." He ignored her. Then came the moment that changed everything. He bowed his head. Not a big dramatic bow, just a short, respectful one. "Ma'am," he said. The word hit the room like a bomb. Ma'am. Not miss. Not hey. Not who are you. Ma'am. Full of respect that made no sense to anyone who had watched them laugh at me all night. The whispers exploded. Did he just... Who is she? What is going on? Marcus straightened up, voice louder now so everyone could hear. "Yerv," he said, "head of Vance Capital." I felt hundreds of eyes snap back to me this time, not to judge my dress, but to search my face for confirmation. "The only reason I can even afford this wedding," Marcus went on, voice shaking. "The only reason my company is alive is because of you. No one else believed in my startup. I sent out 100 emails begging for help. One person answered. V. He looked at me like I was some kind of miracle. You saved my career. You changed my life. I've never even had the chance to say thank you. And I'm supposed to stand up there and pretend I don't recognize you sitting in the back like a nobody. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind." The name Vance Capital started bouncing around the room. I heard it on the left, on the right from the front rows. Some people recognized it right away. Others whispered who and got very quick explanations. On the front row, Eleonora's face went from pale to paler. Clarissa looked frozen in place at the altar bouquet clutched so tight the flowers were probably bruised. Colleen finally sat back down, slowly staring at me, like he was seeing a whole galaxy where he'd thought there was just one star. The mask dropped on that room in an instant. All that quiet, casual cruelty, all the jokes and comments and little digs, suddenly the targets had shifted. And that's when his mother kicked in her emergency protocol. Eleonora stood up, smoothed her dress, and walked toward us like she was crossing a stage. Her face rearranged itself into this warm, maternal expression that made me want to laugh and gag at the same time. "Zola." "My dear," she said sweetly, reaching for my arm. "Why didn't you tell us who you are? This is all just a terrible misunderstanding." I pulled my arm back slightly and held her gaze. "No," I said softly. "It isn't." The room went very still again. "There was no misunderstanding, Mrs. Sterling," I went on. "The way you and your daughter spoke to me before you knew my name, before you knew my bank account, that was not confusion. That was honesty. That was who you are when you think someone has nothing you need." I let that sink in. Then added, "The only thing that changed is that now you know you were rude to the wrong person." She opened her mouth, closed it again. For once, there was nothing smooth or controlled about her expression. Behind her, Clarissa finally snapped. She spun on Marcus' face, twisted tears, cutting streaks in her makeup. "So what was this?" she screamed. "A joke. Some test. You humiliate me in front of everyone we know. You walk away at the altar for her." Marcus looked at her with something that wasn't anger. It was pity. Cold, clean pity. "Did I humiliate you, Clarissa?" he asked calmly. "Or did you humiliate yourself? The way you treated the one person who gave me a future, did you think that ugliness would never come back to you?" That was the moment I realized I didn't care how the rest of that wedding played out. I didn't want to watch that family implode. I didn't want to see the guests pretend they hadn't laughed. I didn't want to stand there and soak in any more of their mess. I turned to Kaylin. "Let's go," I said quietly. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look at his mother or his sister or the guests. He reached for my hand, stood up and walked out with me. We left behind a wrecked ceremony, a shattered social ladder, and a truth hanging over that ballroom like smoke. They hadn't just disrespected Kaylin's girlfriend. They had exposed who they really were in front of someone who could afford never to speak to them again. In the car, as we pulled away from the hotel, the city lights smeared across the windshield in long streaks. The silence was thick but not suffocating. It felt like the quiet after a storm, when everything is still, and your ears are still ringing a little. After a while, Kaylin soktok. "I'm sorry," he said. I was ready for the wrong kind of apology. The "I'm sorry you didn't tell me." Guilt trip the "I feel betrayed" speech. But that's not what came out. "I'm not sorry that you didn't tell me about Vance," he said. Voice low. "You had every right to keep that to yourself. I'm sorry because I failed you. I thought I understood my family's prejudice and I didn't. I thought I could protect you from their words while still bringing you into their world, and I walked you right into their line of fire." He ran a hand over his face. I told myself my mother and sister were just shallow, just a little snobby. I didn't see their words as a weapon. And you did. You've been facing that weapon your whole life. I'm the one who was naive. Something in me gave way at that. A door I'd kept locked for a very long time creaked open. "It was never about hiding, Kaylin," I said quietly. "Not really. It was about searching." He turned to look at me, waiting. "After my parents died, and I took over, everybody treated me differently," I said. Not because I had changed, but because they thought they knew what I was worth now. Every friend, every person I dated, every handshake, there was always that question hanging in the air. Do you like me? Or do you like what I can do for you? I stared out the window as I spoke, watching the city blur. I got tired of it, I said. Tired of counting the ways people looked past me. Tired of wondering how much of their kindness was just an investment. So I created a small life inside my big life. That coffee shop, those books, that gray sweater. That was my real world. Nobody knew my last name. Nobody cared. I could just be Zola. I took a breath. When I met you there, the version of you I saw wasn't a billionaire. It was just a man who listened. A man who asked good questions. A man who didn't look at me like I was a walking vault. I didn't tell you about Vance because that secret was the wall protecting the only place in my life that still felt real. He listened, eyes soft, jaw tight. "I get it," he said at last. "I fell in love with that woman in the gray sweater, not with a balance sheet. The part where you're also this powerhouse investor who scares the hell out of half the tech world. That's just bonus. But it's not why I'm here." He smiled, a little broken around the edges, but sincere. "I'm in awe of you, yeah?" he added. "But not because of what you own. Because you walked into that ballroom in a simple dress, knowing exactly who you were, and refused to let them change you." Then he did something that told me exactly which side he was on. He pulled the car over, put it in park, picked up his phone and called his mother. Put it on speaker. It rang once, twice. Colleen Eleonora answered. Voice high and tight. "Where are you? What is going on? We can still salvage." "Mother," he said, cutting across her noise. His voice was calm now, almost eerily so. "I'm going to say this once. If you and Clarissa cannot find a way to offer Zola a sincere, genuine, and public apology for how you treated her, then you will not be part of my life going forward." She tried to interrupt. He didn't let her. "There will be no negotiation about this," he said. "That is the boundary. That is the choice." Then he hung up. Just like that. No arguing. No waiting to see if she cried. Giving her space to twist it around. He sat there for a second, staring at the dashboard, then turned the key and pulled back onto the road. He didn't drive to his place or mine. He drove back to the coffee shop. When we stepped out of the car, the city felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just more honest. The sign above the shop door glowed soft and familiar. The bell chimed as we walked in the smell of coffee, wrapping around us like a blanket. The same barista was there wiping down the same counter. He glanced up, took in my dress. Kaylin's suit, the subtle destruction in our eyes, and just raised his eyebrows like, "You two have had a day, huh?" "Usual," he asked. "Please," I said, and my voice almost broke on that one word. We sat in our usual seats, the same faded armchairs, the same table between us. Nothing in the room had changed, but everything between us had. No more secret identities. No more half-truths. No more pretending that his family's behavior was just a little old-fashioned, or that my silence was just shyness. We talked for a long time that night. Not about the wedding. Not about what people were going to say. Not about Marcus, or Clarissa, or Eleonora. We talked about us. What kind of life we actually wanted. What boundaries we needed to set. How we were going to handle a world that would now see us as the billionaire couple, when we'd fallen in love as just two people sharing a corner of a noisy city. Here's the part where I turn this back to you. Do you think walking away from that family was the right thing for him to do? Do you think one big public apology can fix years of quietly cruel behavior? If you were me, would you ever feel comfortable going back into that house, even if they apologized on their knees? Because here's what I've learned. A person's worth is not a label you can see. It's not a price tag on a dress. It's not the shade of their skin. It's not the last name on their invitation. It's not the number of zeros in their bank account. It's how they treat people when they think those people are small, powerless beneath them. That's the real test. In that ballroom, before anyone knew who I was brave for wearing a simple dress. I was exotic because my skin was dark. I was seated in the second row of importance because of what they thought I wasn't. After one man said, "Yes, boss," suddenly I was someone worth chasing, someone worth flattering, someone worth apologizing to. But for me, the only thing that changed was that I finally got to see their true faces clearly, with all the polite excuses stripped away. So now I want to hear from you. If it were you sitting in that chair, would you have stood up and made a speech, or walked out like I did? Would you forgive a family like that? If they said the right words? Or is there a line that once crossed you never step back over? Do you think Marcus was a hero for blowing up that wedding? Or selfish for doing it in such a public way? Tell me in the comments. Argue with me. Agree with me. Tell your own story about a time someone judged you by what they saw instead of who you are, or a time you found out someone was way more than they looked. I'll be down there reading, because these aren't just stories for a channel. This is the stuff people live through every day. If this hits something and you hit like so more people see it, subscribe. If you want more real, messy, honest stories like this, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that dignity doesn't come from a label. It comes from how you carry yourself when the room is against you. Thanks for listening to mine. Now, I want to hear yours.